Mr. Mayor, members of the council, periodically I provide economic updates of various indicators to the Moscow Urban Renewal Agency Board, and Supervisor Riedner felt it might be of value to do the same thing for this body as well. What is an economic indicator? An economic indicator is a piece of economic data, usually of macroeconomic scale, that is used by investors to interpret current or future investment possibilities and judge the overall health of the economy. They're usually split into three categories: leading, lagging, and coincident. Due to the nature of economic reporting, the vast majority of indicators will be lagging to some extent. Leading indicators are popular because they give the earliest warnings about an economy due to change from boom to bust or vice versa. However, leading indicators can be less reliable than other indicators. For example, the Conference Board runs an index which has correctly predicted every recession since it started, but has also produced some false signals. This led economist Paul Samuelson to joke, "Economists have correctly predicted 9 of the last 5 recessions." Examples of leading indicators would be money supply figures, mortgage originations, consumer confidence surveys. Lagging indicators are useful information from the recent past to make predictions. As a general rule, the longer the lag, the more accurate the indicator will be, as is based on a larger quantity of information. However, an indicator that lags too much may be useless for quick-moving cycles. Examples of lagging indicators: employment, industrial production, home prices, etc. Coincident indicators are those giving information about the current state of the economy. Because of delays in aggregating and formatting data, it is often very difficult to get useful data of this nature. For example, these data might be daily sales figures for a department store or an announcement of a wave of new hiring. So looking at a quick glance, the 4 areas that many macroeconomists will look at are employment, housing starts, industrial production, and home prices. Employment is a measure of job growth. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics releases monthly payroll employment figures from its current employment statistics survey, and most economists will use a 3-month moving average on those. Housing starts, a measure of investment. The U.S. Census Bureau releases monthly data on single-family housing permits. Same thing, using a 3-month moving average. Industrial production is a measure of output. The U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis releases monthly information on industrial production by type of industry. And home prices, that's a measure of wealth. This information is available quarterly, not monthly, but it is included in the index because of the importance of housing in the economic climate. Information from the Federal Housing Finance Agency is converted to monthly frequency by spreading the quarterly change out over 3 months. So the U.S. business cycle map in December of 2013, this is what the national economy looks like. The green indicates states where the economy is expanding. Red would be recession. Yellow would be at risk, and blue, light blue, would be recovering. Now, if you were to look at this map back in 2009, every state was red.
Yeah, this is really different than last time.
So we're starting to see some real positive changes. The states that were in green were pretty much those that were energy providers, such as North Dakota, Texas, Oklahoma, Alaska. Now we're seeing Utah, Colorado, Massachusetts, Minnesota, and Iowa, also Nebraska. Idaho's regional economy, the Metropolitan Statistical Area, there are approximately 366 MSAs. Metropolitan statistical areas have at least one urbanized area. I won't go into the definition of how they define that, with a population of at least 50,000 plus adjacent territory, which have a high degree of social and economic interaction with the core as measured by commuting ties. They must have at minimum one county, but often includes several counties. So in Idaho, this is a map that depicts the MSAs and how they are currently functioning. All of the MSAs within the state are in recovery. The local economy, Micropolitan Statistical Area. There are 576 micropolitan areas. Must have an urbanized area of at least 10,000 in population, but less than 50. They must be at least one county. Latah County is a micropolitan statistical area. And this is a map that depicts all of the micropolitan areas within the state. So looking at employment, this is kind of where the rubber meets the road. When you look at the blue line, which is the Moscow micropolitan area, you'll see that employment peaked at 2008. And then with the recession, we crashed and burned. And you can see the trend line heading south. And it wasn't until 2011 that things started picking up again. But the rate in which it's picking up is relatively modest. And so when you project forward, you can see that 2017 is almost at the same location as the 2008 peak. And so when you hear people talk about the lost decade within the economy, that's kind of what we're looking at. So you can see from 2003 to 2013, we actually had a net change in jobs of negative of 1.5 within the area. The nation as a whole grew 4.6%, and the state grew 9%. You look at unemployment, then the Latah County has traditionally been lower than many of the other locations within the state. This is for December. These were the unadjusted rates for December, or the preliminary rates for December, but dropping to a low of 4.8%. Housing starts, permits issued. Not a tremendous amount of permits. Multifamily, you can see, started to take off a little bit. And single-family residential actually fell from 2011 to 2012, started picking up a bit. And two-family residential started picking up a bit as well. Industrial production and primary industries. When economists look at different regions and they are evaluating a region for economic strength, they look at primary industries and they look at reactive industries. And primary industries, in a nutshell, are those industries that they import money and export a good or a service outside of the local community for the most part. And reactive industries are those that are dependent upon the growth of the primary industries. And so when we look at the growth rate between 2003 and 2013, we can see that we had growth in agriculture 25%, which was significant. Mining and quarrying, because of the small sample size that was not disclosed. Manufacturing, 39%. Wholesale trade, 49%. But we saw big drops in construction, which is a reactive industry, retail trade, finance and insurance, real estate, rental and leasing. Some of the larger gains as well were in management of companies and enterprises. But we lost government, state employees, and professional scientific and technical services really took a huge hit, and so did transportation and warehousing. When you look at the one-year change from 2012 to 2013, you'll see manufacturing has picked up by 1%, retail trade has picked up, management of companies has picked up, private educational services, healthcare, social assistance, agriculture, wholesale trade, transportation, finance and insurance, professional, scientific, and technical services. You'd also note that the Latah County transient occupancy tax increased 11.28% from fiscal year 2012. The losses in sectors were information, arts, entertainment, and recreation, government, construction, real estate rental and leasing, accommodation and food service, and University of Idaho enrollment. And I should have probably gone back to that. That's in the prior slide. Student enrollment at the University of Idaho from 2003 to 2013 dropped 7.46, and that's a huge primary industry for us. The industry of students. One of the other areas that you look at as a site selection consultant are how much money do people make and which jobs pay above the county average, and are they growing in those particular areas. And so this is a table that identifies which industries pay the most in relationship to the county's average of $40,700. I wish Paul Kimmel were still here, because, boy, those utility guys are making bank. Home prices, average home sale prices in Latah County increased 2.53% from $213,792 in 2012 to $219,200 in 2013. After a 3.87% increase the prior year. The average home sale price in the city of Moscow remained the same from 2012 to 2013 at $235,000 after a 2.46% increase the prior year. Population growth, very slow. Annual growth rate average of 0.77% is forecasted through 2018. Questions?
Art?
I've got a couple for you. On metropolitan statistical areas, can those be cross-border, or do they have to be within a state?
They can be cross-bordered. Many of them are, including the Lewiston. Clarkston is an MSA.
So are there relative advantages or disadvantages to that? And would it behoove Moscow to discuss with Pullman a metropolitan statistical area?
I believe that there are advantages to being a metropolitan statistical area. There are primary two. Once you become an MSA, then transportation funding, you get a direct allocation of those federal dollars. There's also, if you are an entitlement entity, then you would also be that would allow for a direct allocation of community development block grant dollars as well. And probably of higher value is the fact that suddenly you're on everybody's list as an MSA. Because as a site selector, when you're looking at 376 markets on behalf of a company, and they say, okay, in 3 weeks we want to know the strongest regions to put this particular type of project, normally that's where you start at, are MSAs, because the markets are bigger or larger, and that's where you're going to be able to improve your client's risk position.
How does one go about accomplishing that?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Betke, we actually went through about a year and a half ago and did a little bit of analysis on that, and worked with some folks over in Pullman. I took every census block group to see whether or not I could make the tie in order to reach the population requirement between the two communities. There's a separation distance that you have to have, and unlike Clarkston and Lewiston, they get extra bennies if there's a river there. Then you're allowed to have this separation of so many miles between jurisdictions. And I thought maybe we could do the same thing with the airport, but you only get a little bit associated with that. So based on the projections I did a year and a half or 2 years ago, it looked like that within the region we would hit the population threshold by 2018, but we wouldn't have the connectivity threshold that was mandated under the requirement at that point. But if Pullman decided to put more residential houses in on the east side of the airport and get closer to the border, then that could dramatically change things. But if I remember correctly from the information I had, they were actually growing to the northwest, which was the opposite direction from where we needed the growth to occur.
Well, let's go to Walter Art, and then I'll come back to you, okay?
Jeff, one of your slides showed the U.S. and Alaska and showed the middle part of the country and Alaska as expanding, I think was the term.
Right. Energy.
Explain Massachusetts.
That is high technology and medical.
Okay, thank you.
Same thing with Utah.
Okay, Art, I'll go back to you.
One other one on your measure of construction and housing starts. Were the previous years a whole year count versus 2013, which of course we're only 3 months in, or were they measured at the same point in the year?
They were the fiscal year for those 3 years. So from October 1st to October 1st.
Okay, so 2013 still got some time to go.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's not perhaps as grim looking as
No.
it seemed.
No. I mean, and my honest opinion is that things are slowly getting better, but there's still some challenges. And the enrollment issue, and if the region continues to grow primary jobs, export-oriented types of jobs, where you import money and export a good or a service, the rest of everything else will become healthier. It just may take a little bit of time. And particularly when you see the graph, that first graph on the employment, where it showed we're still trying to catch back up to 2008.
Other questions or comments to Jeff? Thank you, Jeff, very much for a terrific report.
You're welcome.